I have really dark days too, and but it's really encouraging when you meet somebody like you guys to hear that, wow, somebody actually thinks it's worth it. So yeah, thank you.
He is a CNN climate correspondent. He's been all over the world. And most importantly, he opens up doors and shows us places and things and people that we would never get a chance to see. So we thank you for that.
When I came out of college, my heroes were David Letterman and Peter Jennings. And so I had this, wouldn't it be great to be a late night host? That was like a dream job. But also I had read All the President's Men. I was a stringer for the LA Herald in college, and I loved that sort of ink-stained romance of the newspaper world, but I hated it being edited. I'd write high school football stories and write these amazing Hemingway-esque leads, and then the next morning I didn't recognize any of it because the editor just wanted to know who won, who was the leading rusher. But but then I discovered TV and radio. We had a great little broadcasting department at Pepperdine, and so I had a resume tape. These are back in the days when, a 3/4-inch resume tape was bigger than this book, and I stole a box of them from school, made my tape, and you just shotgun them to stations around the country blindly, hoping that someone will watch it and give you a job. It took a year before anybody even called me back. And I started in sports because that, for me, was the most creatively liberating. It was the era of early Sports Center, where attitude and personality really worked. And I picked sports more as a palette. I mean, I loved sports. I tried to play. I wasn't very good. I was always like the 25th man on the baseball team, but I loved the, the camaraderie and the parlance and the shorthand. And I, love sports was the love language and growing up in Wisconsin. So Packers and Brewers and all of that. And I succeeded at it pretty, I went from a tiny little market in Minnesota to Green Bay. I'm a Packer fan, so that was amazing. And then I went to Chicago at the last 3 Bulls championships, and then to LA. I was a sportscaster for the first 3 years of Shaq and Kobe there, those championships. But I got bored after a while, and you get very little sympathy, complaining about going to sit on the front row at the Lakers game, and doing 3 minutes of highlights. But I was so much more curious about things. And then when 9/11 happened, I was a sportscaster in LA, and they sent me home for 2 weeks because I was the goofy sports chimp, and that really was like this moment where I thought, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. But I didn't think I had a legitimate path to network news like working with my heroes, Peter Jennings. So when that contract ended at KBC, I walked away and I spent a year in Hollywood. I thought, well, maybe I can go into screenwriting and try the late night pilot route. And we did it. People recognized me in LA because I'd been on the air, and so it was easy to get meetings. And I sold a screenplay, and I got a pilot deal at FX and the USA networks. And then, but within about a year, all of that dried up. And at the same time, we became pregnant with my daughter, and Good Morning America called. They said, we're going to start a weekend GMA. You want to come anchor it? And it was just like this, thunderclap, that no one saw coming. And sure enough, I'm now working with Peter Jennings, but I spent a lot of time trying to do sort of network correspondent cosplay, just trying. I felt like such an imposter. There was people like Chris Cuomo and John Berman, all these other people who were waiting for an anchor chair. And I came in, and this wise ass sports guy came in and leapfrogged them, which set up, sort of a new dynamic professionally I'd never experienced before. But early in that, somewhere in those first few years, Diane Sawyer took a shine to me, and she, had amazing cachet for getting things greenlit. And she said, this is like 2005. She says, I hear some things are happening in China. Why don't you go explain China to us and do like a big part, multi-part series? I'm like, oh yeah. So it was the first time somebody just said, go do a country. And it was, and so we went to a Nike factory and to Shenzhen when the tech sector was just taking off and all this change was happening. And, came back and did a 3-part series. And after the first one aired, Bob Iger, who was the president of Disney then at the time, called me. It's like, that was incredible. That's exactly what I've been trying to tell people about opening a Disneyland in China. And so that helped me get, I did a similar series on India. And then once you sort of have one thing that people remember you for, they want more of that. And I realized that early in my career, it was all about just being funny on TV or being, a smart guy. And, it's the class clown in me and, whatever it is, the nomadic only child looking for attention behind it. But once you get older, and especially after becoming a parent, all of that novelty wears off. And it's like, wait a minute, if I have the gift of this access, then I want to tell the stories that affect the most life, human or otherwise, and tell stories that really, places that we all agree are incredibly special, and understand why we like them that way, physically, culturally, but then also explain all these forces that are constantly threatening these things we hold dear. And wow, there's a better way of thinking about this. If we can only pivot here, just imagine the possibilities. And that kind of, and it's not really a recipe, but that outlook on storytelling has really, again, as you say, it's helped me fill up a couple of passports, and I'm just so lucky.
What's next?
We're building out the climate team. I've got a bunch of exciting projects in the pipeline that are going to take. I can't say too much, but we're actually moving beyond just two-dimensional television as we get into the world of virtual reality and immersive content. I'm going to do a project with Apple around that, and just going to some of the most remote places in the world to capture things in ways that people can appreciate them even more with new technology. But, we keep building. I'm lucky enough to be at a place, knock wood, that really cares about my beat and really it encourages me to find and discover and come up with new content. And, there's been a lot of corporate maneuvering in the world. I hope that maintains. I hope we become a source for that information. So in this business, it's sort of an unmoored period. Nobody knows what's going to happen, week to week right now. But I have such a firm belief that, especially in people who care about climate and the environment and care about our connection to each other in this global system, again, there are so many allies out there that people don't realize they have. You read the headlines about the people who are opposed to the way you think about things, but man, there's so many folks, and we all need that nourishment. That we need to be moss for each other, that when you talk about something that we care about and we can bond on it, that advances the ball, maybe an inch, but it really is, that's what being human is about, right? Is connection and community. Right now, I'm just lucky enough to be in a place that cares about this topic and allows me to have the variety of where I can go everywhere from a hurricane to farm aid and everything in between. But then I realized when they came up with sort of the climate role, this is the one beat that includes all the others, the economy, foreign policy, food, shelter, transportation, all depends on an ecosystem in balance and the forces that are driving it out of balance. And what are the alternatives? It is literally people think it's a menu item for pollsters. I think it's the whole restaurant.
Have you met anyone who has inspired Bill Weir?
Absolutely. I mean, most of the time, it's people who are either, wildlife biologists or botanists or people toiling in just total obscurity to try to save a species or a tiny little ecosystem somewhere. I was we did an amazing hour, the whole story, our Sunday magazine show on whale scientists. And, they're in the headlines washing up on beaches and whale strikes and what's causing it and all these. So I found, let's get to the bottom of this. So you call up the preeminent whale scientists in the world and say, I want to hang out with you. And they said, well, we're going to Antarctica. Let's go. And so we went to Antarctica, and it was this team of scientists, and one of them was a woman from Colombia. And so we ended up, because they were following these migrating humpbacks that go down the South Pole and then migrate thousands of miles up the coast of South America. And sometimes they see the same whale in both places. And this woman, and while we were in Colombia, I decided, well, let's shoot another piece. And we went into the jungle and met this woman named Rosamira Guillen, who was a zoologist. She was like an landscape architect for zoos. And she fell in love with this one little monkey, this cotton-top tamarin, realized it only exists in one part of Colombia, realized that because of cattle ranches, that their forests were shrinking and shrinking. And so she just says, I want to do this. And she sort of methodically set out to start raising money, buying ranches, planting trees, bringing back forests to save this sort of charismatic species, and then everything else around it in there. And this is not a job that can be done by dropping seeds from drones. You got to get dirty. You got to get sweaty. You got to get in the dirt and figure out what grows where and what. And so people like that. And when I feel sorry for myself, or I think people aren't paying enough attention to what's happening to their planet and get frustrated by the politics of it, I focus on folks like her. And there's a half a dozen more around the world. And I also like to look at sort of examples from history. And, personal heroes. I love history, and I love historical narratives and that sort of thing. But when you think about, the civil rights movement and people who have had it so much harder and had to struggle with so much more throughout the years. And so quitting's not an option, buck up, get out there, be positive, remember those allies. And so that's kind of the people. It's funny, back in the day, I would have answered that question really differently early in my career, and would have been like rock stars I'd interviewed, or just, hoping this person, this actor, somebody, we hit it off and they like me, all that human stuff that comes up when you're young and have access to people. But these days it's those folks who, just the real ones that are out there grinding. Some days, I'll be honest, I'll give you the exclusive, I'm faking it, man. Like, I'm trying to preach tolerance and, reach now's the time to get to know your neighbor, regardless of their yard sign during the election, because you guys can agree on this hiking trail or this fishing hole that you share, and I'm trying to preach that message, but sometimes it's like, I'm just as frustrated and angry.
Don't give up.
As the next guy. And I have really dark days too. And, but it's really encouraging when you meet somebody like you guys to hear that, wow, somebody actually thinks it's worth it. So thank you. When I was a sportscaster at WGN in Chicago, I was the courtside reporter for the Bulls during their last 3 runs, and also one of the morning show anchors. And one day I get a call, and a guy's like, hi, this is, I'm at Nike, and we're doing a thing now. We're going to do an advertising campaign with sportscasters around the country, and do like a funny ad around, the sportscasters and the shoes they wear. And we'd like to include you. And I was like, oh, fantastic. This is great. I'm going to have a shoe deal with Nike. Are you kidding me? This is, a dream. And he's like, so what kind of shoes do you, what do you like? What do you wear? Tell me about, and anyway, I talked to this guy for like 15 minutes. And then I go tell a friend of mine, the late, great Randy Salerno, a fellow anchor. I was like, dude, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to get a shoe deal with Nike. And he looks at me and with this kind of a half smile on his face. And he said, yeah, I hate to tell you this. That guy wasn't from Nike. He's just a viewer with a foot fetish. He's called all of us.
Are you kidding me?
We're proud to be sponsored by Litchfield Distillery. They like to call themselves Batchers in honor of the early farmers of Northwest Connecticut, a region known for its ample yield of wheat, corn, and barley. Growing these crops in the rocky terrain requires grit and determination. For the past decade, Litchfield Distillery has been busy distilling Litchfield County's best harvest into fine craft spirits, one batch at a time. Litchfield Distillery, the spirit of hard work.